Well, we're here at the CCA workbench for the Academy Outdoors and Rigs and Techniques.
Yes.
And you know, Dave, Mike Avenon's one of our experts that we do a lot of Sportsman's Adventures with. And you know, Mike, red snapper certainly is one of your expertise. Besides grouper fishing. So why don't you tell us to start off, how do you find these fish?
Well, it's one of my favorite fish to catch by far. We got a real short season, 2 months, but the easiest way to look for those fish, and the way I like to look for them, is you can troll around a little bit looking for new areas. The biggest mistake that guys make is they want to go right back to the same spot every time. Mm-hmm. Oh, you know what? The fish are getting smaller. There's no fish there after a while. Well, guess what? You killed them all. It's time to look for some new spots. And the way you can look for those new spots is to put 2 lines out, something simple, 2 feathers, whatever, and troll around a little bit. Or even just spend 30 minutes looking at your bottom machine at the beginning of the day. And what you're looking for is fish up in the water, which would be those nice red stripes, or the red pile. The red pile is always the easiest one to find because it marks up real big in the water. Anything that's 5, 10, 15 feet off the water. And when I say
off the bottom.
Off the bottom, sorry. Mm-hmm. You want it to touch the bottom. If it's not touching the bottom, the fish aren't feeding on them. The fish aren't there. That's the key.
Really?
You want to make sure that red is tight to the bottom, but red on the bottom and you're all set as far as finding the fish.
But if there's a gap under there, they're probably not being eaten.
They're not being eaten because they're up moving around.
I gotcha.
So in other words, everything's pressed down nice and tight to the bottom when you see that red on the bottom machine. And that's always a good indicator. Another good indicator is not only do you see the red tight to the bottom, but you also see individual fish swimming around the pile. That's the same scenario. That bait fish is being fed on, and it's a great place to start.
So Mike, you know, I used to fish with Ralph Delf down in Keys, and one of the things that I learned from him was whenever you wanted to catch a fish on artificial, that when you first get to the spot, that's when you'd want to introduce the artificial. So do you agree with that?
I do, actually, and it seems like the bigger fish are usually aggressive. There's 2 ways that those things will bite. Either the big fish are going to bite first, because they're the bully, he's ready, get out of my way, it's mine, I'm going to eat it. And if you're firing down a jig like this, obviously in the beginning of that bite, it's going to be the best opportunity to get that bigger fish.
Yeah, so I mean, one of my favorite ways to catch groupers and snappers because of the plug rod is to drop a big heavy jig, tip it with a piece of fish bites. The aggressive fish, as you said, are going to bite that first. So once you introduce bait, then it's a little bit of a different story.
And the cool thing about the fish bites is it's tough.
Yeah.
You can miss him 2, 3 times, they're not going to tear it off, whereas like a piece of squid, he's going to knock it right off the hook. You get 2 or 3 different shots with this.
Now, I've used big baits before, mainly on the East Coast where I live, because we're out in pretty deep water. Usually we start fishing in 90 feet and out to 200 or whatever. But a lot of times when I'm trying to catch a big red snapper, I use a big bait, because the last one I caught was a really big one that I caught on a whole Alamaco jack that I just butterflied. I was actually trying to catch a grouper, but a giant red snapper ate it. And what was the key to that is we were getting a lot of little ticky bites.
Sure. Yep.
And I could feel them ticky biting on that big bait. And what that does is that draws attention. And when that big bait is down there and all those little ones are chewing on it, that'll get the eyeball of the big one. And that's exactly what happened in that instance. A big red snapper saw those little ones chewing on the bigger bait and came and ate the big bait.
So like he said, there's 2 bites, right? You can catch the big ones on the jig to start, but if you're in that other type of bite where it takes a little while to get them going, you can use the squid on the chicken rig to initiate the bite.
What size hook?
I like to start with a 9.0.
9.0.
Unless the fish are finicky, then you can go down to like a 6.0 or a 7.0. But I always like to start with a 9.0, 80-pound fluorocarbon leader. And if you're not getting the bite, you can downsize your tackle to get the bite if the fish are a little bit finicky.
And you're using a circle hook, obviously.
Always, yes. And with the chicken rig, lead right on the bottom, it works really well. But we'll start it with the squid to get the fish biting. And then once we get them worked up a little bit, we'll fire down a live bait like a pinfish or a blue runner, something that's big and hardy that those little fish can knock around a little bit, but the bigger fish can eat.
Now, do you when you put down the live bait, do you use a knocker rig or do you put those on?
Right on the chicken rig. We always fish a chicken rig, yeah. It's super beneficial.
And you put 2 live baits or 3 live baits?
Just one live bait. Actually, a chicken rig I'm talking about is more of a dropper rig that's lead on the bottom, the hook above it.
Right.
And it's like I've said 100 times before, with that chicken rig, you're leaving the lead sinker right on the bottom. You're eliminating it out of the equation between the rod tip and the hook. So your sensitivity is going way up. And any little bite, you can feel so much more with that tiny little bump that you get sometimes from the red snappers.
So we also have a new venting tool that's made by Diamond Fishing
Well,
Products.
they're having a new, evidently there's a new regulation coming out July 15th that says every boat that's fishing for grouper and snapper has to have one of these kind of tools, not just a venting tool, but a descending tool.
A descending tool.
Right.
Yeah,
So Diamond's making one now.
Correct.
This is pretty cool because it's super simple to use.
Right.
There's nothing complicated about this thing. You attach the lead, you tie it to the top, down the fish
Tie
goes.
your rod to here. The
Yeah.
lead is here. This goes through the bottom lip of the fish, and as you descend down, as he starts to what do you call that when he gets through?
He descends down.
He's getting the bubbles out of
but
his system.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
He
right.
decompresses.
Yeah, there you go.
Decompress. After
That's
he's
it.
decompressed, then he
Yeah.
can swim off of this. Plus, you're going to reel this, and it's just going to come out of his.
Yeah, you don't even have to
Yep.
really jerk it. You just got to get it down to where it is and then just start reeling and it'll come right off.
Plus, it's small.
Diamond
It's
Fishing
something simple to
Products.
put in your
Right.
tackle box,
And you don't have to be, making surgery on a fish offshore with
No.
that venting tool.
Guys, we were out of time. Holy cow, I can't believe it.